I'm not a salesperson. I do not do sales. So what is the difference? And that's where the idea came of storytelling and the meaning. So basically, the only thing I did is I was so convinced of the things that I was sharing and was honest about it that they could feel this authenticity.
Good day, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you at the start of today's talk that I'm having with my guest, Pascal Wiscour Conter, who came all the way from Luxembourg here. He's an entrepreneur and storyteller to tell us something about the project he is currently involved in, about a book he has written, and a little bit about, of course, storytelling. Pascal, what can you tell us about Farino Pipe? How did it come to life?
Well,
Or how
first,
did it come to your life?
how did it come to my life? First, thank you very much for having me. And I have to give credit to Dubravka, who was the one who mentioned this. She had seen me basically presenting already for various projects and said, you should come to Zagreb and to come to CSEM and explain a bit more about storytelling. And then we just had by chance two of my accomplices in some projects that we have, which is Chuck Garcia and Jyoti Guptara, that were also visiting LSB last week in Luxembourg. And so we just added a trip to Zagreb. They have left yesterday. I'm still here to meet with you today. And it's literally about explaining to people what storytelling is. A lot of people know the word, but do not really realize what it means, and why storytelling also works in a corporate environment, and how you need to anchor that in a sense of purpose so that it starts to make meaning for people. It's just not just about articulating nice words and trying to do something. It has to be much deeper, and even more so today in an environment where things are accelerating in an exponential way. So if you want to be meaningful, you need to find new ways to stand out how you communicate.
And actually, the colleagues you have mentioned that gave an amazing panel we had this Monday and then masterclass on Tuesday, and you together created this communication strategy that's focused on the mindset, which is Garcia's part, the meaning, which is your part, and then the method, which is Guptara's part. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. And in a very nice turn of events, it's a bit a demonstration of what I've tried to explain in my book, which is when you have people who are like-minded, and I call them now why-minded, because we have the same why, we have a similar purpose, similar values, and I happen to be the one who brought them together, but people brought me together with these two. And there was something happening where you felt like, we have an alignment. We believe in similar values and we have a similar goal, but we have different approaches. We're complementary. So that's why I call that why-minded and how complementary. That means we believe in the same things, we reach for the same stars, but we have different ways of doing it. Chuck is someone who has an incredible experience on Wall Street, has been the former spokesperson of Michael Bloomberg, and so he comes in with an approach to leadership. He brought literally emotional intelligence and wrote a book even where he talks about stoicism that you can use as a leader. That's why he was on the mindset, or he's on the mindset side. My part is a bit the bridge between the two, because I go from mindset to storytelling, but anchoring it into meaning, which is the purpose. So that's why I was then the one connecting the two. And Jyoti is a storyteller. He's a best-selling author. He has written fictional books and others. And so he has developed, or should I say, simplified methods. There exist a lot of methods for storytelling. Storytelling is also what's used in, for instance, to write a movie and so on. And obviously you have to adapt it for corporate settings. So he was able to do a methodology that brings it down to 5 specific elements, because the full writing of a movie is much more complex. And so, yeah, we just fell in friendship and realized that we could do something together.
Amazing. And you mentioned it, but before we go to the book, I love your story. You have a very interesting CV. And the story with mega yachts in Luxembourg is something that is incredible. So how did storytelling help you in your business and in your entrepreneur path?
So it helped me at the beginning, and I was not aware that it was storytelling. So it's a kind of a longer journey until I realized, but that's actually the thing. So yes, I'm from Luxembourg. As you know, Luxembourg is a financial sector. So many people get encouraged to go into that. And it was already back then when I was in college, the same thing. So very logically after college, I end up in finance. And I just realized it's not my thing. I'm not feeling home there. So it's more like, what can I do? And by pure chance, I met people when I was for a business trip in Belgium who said, oh, you have this maritime register for cargo ships. Is there a possibility to register mega yachts? Like mega yachts, we speak of yachts that are 20, 30, 50 meter long, that are worth millions. And I'm like, this is my thing. I'm going to run with that. I have to say, I have no clue about this yachting. I had back then been to the sea just once in my life when I was 4 years age with my grandparents. They offered me a little sailing boat, like a toy. I took it, put it to our shelves, and never touched it. It was just not my thing. But here, it was really the opportunity to be an entrepreneur that I saw. Back then, you didn't call it a startup. Now, today, we have all this startup support, but back then, there was nothing like that. So I had to convince the commissioner in charge of maritime business in Luxembourg, who said, you need to convince the Minister of Transport. So I got to convince the Minister of Transport. Then they didn't know how to write the regulations, so I had to bring the expert from Paris who knew how to do that. And I sat in a room where we wrote what became the law, the regulations for the registration of yachts under Luxembourg flag. Interestingly, that status didn't exist anywhere. It was like, you have business jets and private jets, and there was not a difference for yachts. You only had pleasure yachts. And now we needed to create a status for commercial yachts, yachts that are being chartered out. And so it's very funny that the concept that is now used everywhere in Europe was invented in Luxembourg, where we don't have the sea, by some guy who has no clue about yachts. But that also means that if you believe in something as an entrepreneur, you can get there.
And this is actually this meaning you're talking about.
Yes.
Something has to have meaning, even though there is no sea and yachts are involved. When you find the meaning and when you know why, then
and that's exactly
anything is accomplished. It's like in a fairy tale.
It is somehow, there's some touch of magic probably, but it's not magic. It's just something that once you understand how it works, and that was my point, that I didn't realize what it was. Why on earth was I convincing wealthy people to entrust me with a yacht in a place where there's no sea? And then my second startup was all in the cloud. But back then, when cloud was very new, so you have to think, cloud, when I started the second startup, is like AI today. It was a bad word. Like people were freaking out. They were nervous with this and didn't know where it was going. So then I said, okay, how come that I managed to convince once and then twice? And people would then tell me, you're a great salesperson. I'm not. I'm not a salesperson. I do not do sales. So what is the difference? And that's where the idea came of storytelling and the meaning. Because if you want, the US have another word for it. In the US, you call that an evangelist. So these are people who are able to share things that they deeply believe in. And that's how you have this authenticity. So basically, the only thing I did is I was so convinced of the things that I was sharing and was honest about it that they could feel this authenticity. And also, of course, I worked hard. It's not like I just say something I believe and it's a fairy tale. It was really something that was possible. We had worked on it and we were able to explain it, but we could explain it with passion. And when the people would see that, they would follow you. They could see that what you say is what you do and what you do is what you said. And that is basically, in a nutshell, where it starts. You have an art of knowing how to explain certain things, but you need really to go and anchor it into some genuine purpose and reality.
You now work, obviously, as a mentor to young people who want to start their business with startups. How is this process? How does it work? How they come to you? How do you choose what project you want to do?
It started when I was in Monaco after having developed the yachting. So obviously you had to be by the sea. So I ended up in Monaco and they have a university there. And so I joined the program there for MBA in luxury goods. And so every year I would have a few students, because I was an expert in yachting, the ones who had an interest for yachting, then I would accompany them. When I was in the US, I did that even in high schools, basically. And there it was like
Amazing.
more early stage, helping them just figure what is a startup, what is important, how do you set it up. And then in New York, again, the same thing. I got involved in multiple projects, and they're sometimes even more mature. So you had real entrepreneurs who were trying to develop something, and my focus was always on communication. And before communication, obviously, there's strategy, because if you don't have a strategy, then you cannot really communicate. So this strategic communication was what I developed. On a side note, that's where I got involved also in developing a writer's room, which is where screenplayers come together to write movie and TV series, and that's where I saw other methodologies. And when I was back in Luxembourg, I had met basically in New York the representatives of the University of Luxembourg, so I joined also there. They have an incubator which is an MIT licensed incubator, so very, very specific approach. And there, basically, they know your strength. So again, I focus on strategy and communication, and I am pretty good for the very early stage. So basically, when there's new projects that somehow need this kind of support, they will submit, and then you just say yes, no. And now today at the Luxembourg School of Business, I am even with my students encouraging that they set up clubs so that they can develop ideas. And then some think of startups. So then there again, it's about helping them just kickstart the whole thing. I happen to work also with other entities, and that's usually they submit you projects, and it's a matter of so my test is to see, are they purpose driven? If I feel that it's not just trying to do something, but they believe in a problem and that they need to find a solution for that problem, then I will help them with pleasure.
And I assume that part of this communication is then allocated to creating, meaningful stories about their projects, about their ideas, etc. What are maybe the problems then come up? Because I assume that maybe younger adults are more susceptible to, let themselves dive in the story. They're maybe more idealistic, which is always good for storytelling, but
I would say the two things that I can think of is the ones who believe they know already, and it's very hard then to have them open up and listen because they're focused on something. And then the ones who are open but have not really an idea which way to take. And I can give you an example. For instance, I work with notably there's a program where there are PhDs, so extremely smart people. They are way smarter than me. They know much more than me. And they have often, as they come to see me, incredible solutions. They come up with, they show me things and you go, wow. I mean, I saw recently like quantum computing solutions for encrypting and everything. But then I tell them, okay, you're way smarter than me. You have something incredible, but I have something that I can bring to you, which is you have this solution and I will help you find a problem for your solution. Because they just are in love with the solution. And the whole idea is that you need to fall in love with the problem of your audience, which means that you first need to understand who is your audience? Who are you talking to? Who might need something like that? Who has a problem that you have a tool that can solve? And that's the other part when people are also lost, is basically to help them first to understand their market. So who will you be talking to?
That's right.
What are their concerns? What is their language? Not meaning like, do they speak French or English or whatever, but it's more like, look, if you tell something to your students here, you will use a different language than if you explain it to your grandmother.
Of course.
So that's the language. And so you need to understand who is your audience, target them, talk in their language about their concerns and their priorities. And in doing so, rather than trying to just talk of what you sell, what you have to offer, if you talk to them about their concerns and thereby show that you have a solution because you're deeply concerned by what they are concerned, you connect in a very different way. And that's the whole strategy. Storytelling is not the first thing you do. When people come and tell me, do me my storytelling, I say, there's several steps before. You need to start with a vision and then a mission, and then you have a value proposition. And then you need to know who you're talking to, and then you can start to do storytelling.
Because it's very, very important, as you said, this you attitude and audience profile, all these basics of communication that cannot be, you cannot miss that step. That step needs to be there.
Yes.
You cannot go straight to the
Yes.
execution.
Not at all.
I mean, storytelling is the execution part,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah,
A
absolutely.
technique.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
successful one, but you need to do this, all
Yes.
these steps,
Yes.
which sometimes takes time in this world that we are living that loves instant solutions. How do you dwell with that?
Well, there's one tool that many used, which is very convenient. It's called the law of distribution of innovation. So it's a bell curve, and they have found that, and it's been developed like in the 60s, I believe. No matter what market you're looking at, there's always like 5 categories of potential customers. The very first ones are called innovators. That's 2.5% of your population. Then come the early adopters. That's 13.5% of your population. Then comes an early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. If you try to communicate with the 3-letter, they're not ready. I mean, the laggards are the ones who do not even, they don't hear what you are saying. The late majority doesn't understand what you're talking of. The early majority doesn't believe you. So you need to talk to the first 16% of innovators and early adopters, because they will understand, and you have a shot at convincing them. And so that means you really need to know who they are. So that's indeed what you say. You have to do this market research. You have to know these people really well. Early innovators are the people who, the first ones driving an electrical car, the first ones who had an iPhone. They will try anything because it's new, and they just want to try. The early adopters will follow, and they are the ones that accept discomfort at the beginning. It may be a software that's not perfect yet. It may be just a bit more expensive. There's still a few things that are not working perfectly, but they believe in something so much that they are happy to take this into account. Now, what do they believe in? What you have to share, this purpose, this vision. So basically the whole strategy is to be able to communicate the vision, articulate it in such a way that it's engaging, that they will feel that and they will want to follow it. It's not that you're selling a product, you're selling a vision, and they want to adhere. They love this. People who follow these brands and who try the first things is always because they just fell in love with the idea.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's always very important. This is, of course, a bit of generalization, but how can we? I always tell my students as well, without generalization, we cannot, know to who we are talking. You need to generalize a little bit. But it's very, very interesting because that's actually how our society is driven.
Yes.
And who is a part of our society. So it's important to know that. Talking about the society, for InnoPipe project that you are part of also deals with entrepreneurship, with startups, trying to involve students in maybe green energies, in renewable sources, which is very, very important. How do you think storytelling?
Yes. So my approach is also, I had this good fortune of living several years in the US, notably in California. So I saw this spirit over there. That's probably the first thing I try to do, is to bring across this different approach, because we're always like asking, why is Silicon Valley booming like that? Why are we in Europe a bit behind? And it's often a matter of mindset. And there's one phrase that I use that over there is very natural, and here will oftentimes be perceived as like, are you sure? And it's to say, fail fast, learn fast. And the example I use is, for instance, you take SpaceX, and you will see in the media that a lot of press is like, oh, again, the rocket exploded. It was a miss. When in reality, it's a strategy. It's to say, we know that it may go wrong, but we learn so much from it that we're happy with doing that. It's called the innovator's dilemma. You will accept to look like an idiot for the beginning because you're trying new things, but you improve in an exponential way. So at the beginning, it's not much. And then more and more that you do, all of a sudden you start to see this curve going up, and eventually you take over the others. And we saw it with the rockets of SpaceX. Everyone thought it was impossible to have a rocket land again, and then it did. And then today, I think it's like 90% of all the rockets, of all the payloads being brought up into space are being done just by that particular rocket. And interestingly, now they have a new rocket, and again, everyone's going like, it's failing, it's failing, it's failing. And no, it's again exactly the same strategy. It just takes some time, but when they get it right, you will see it's going to go really fast again. So that's one of the things that is very different. They will dare more because there's less the fear of judgment. And in Europe, we're more used of be careful, what will people think if it goes wrong? So that's the first thing. And the other aspect is that I tell people always, there's another phrase that they use in Silicon Valley, is that you have to run like your hair is on fire. So you have to be really hungry. You really want to solve a problem. It can't be a hobby. And often I see startups, they do it, but they do it like a hobby. See, they may have something else on the side, but at some stage you need to just fully commit to it, because if your audience has a real issue, they expect you to put 100% of your energy into solving the problem, and then you will start to take off. But you have to give your heart.
Yeah, when you mentioned this failure, straight to my mind come speeches like from Steve Jobs.
Yes.
And they always tell that they learn more from the failure than
Indeed.
success. And a lot of things then came from the failure. When we're talking about space, for instance, they've been used to better our life here on Earth, for instance.
Yes.
So it's the things people maybe don't see. And I think in United States, they're maybe more oriented on the positive outcomes
Yes,
of the
they
failure.
consider that if you failed, you have a gathered experience. So now you're better.
Of course. And in Europe, it's like we are measuring
Yes, and if
who
you
failed how many times.
If you fail, it means you're not reliable.
Yeah.
Yes.
So actually we need to, I know when I'm teaching companies feedback, I always tell them you cannot only teach negative feedback, you need to teach positive feedback as well. So the whole thing,
Indeed.
not only one side, you need to know how to give positive feedback and accept it. And then we can go on the more difficult part.
You learn more from that constructive feedback than from compliments.
Yes.
Compliments is great for ego.
Yeah.
Doesn't help your venture.
But I don't know how is it in Luxembourg, in Croatia, when you say, wow, I like your jacket, then they will start, this is, I borrowed this, or this was on sale. So this is also part of not accepting even the positive things.
Yes.
So how will the employee accept if you are saying maybe something constructive, something that needs to be changed,
Indeed.
when maybe we are not able even to accept something that's good.
Yeah.
So, but
we
you
almost
cannot
feel
grow
embarrassed.
without
Yeah,
the
it's true.
feedback. Talking about the purpose, I have to mention your book that's coming out, The Culture of Purpose, where you're actually trying to help both people and companies to survive in this current context of IE with authentic storytelling. I really like that.
And it started with a startup. Literally, because when I was back in Luxembourg, I got involved in a project, and they had a project of doing something similar to an Airbnb, a different approach, in a different market. So I dived into how Airbnb worked, and it's interesting because the Airbnb, for years, they were struggling until they changed their approach. And they went for a meaningful approach. Until then, they were focusing on the platform, and then at some stage they realized, no, we have two communities, the host and the guest, and talking of their problem in their language was the idea. And then it just boomed. So and that's how I started to go deeper into things. And then it's hard to explain or to convince people when you talk about these things. So I also looked into neuroscience to say, how can I explain these things? And basically, I did not manage to convince this entrepreneur with that startup, but I had written a document to convince him. And I thought, you know what? It's not lost. I'm going to make it a white paper. I published it on my LinkedIn. And then at some stage, I got connected with a school, and they said, would you teach in our MBA program? I said, yes. And they asked me to do communication. So I used this white paper as the basis for my class. I wrote the whole class, the whole course. And then at some stage, I spoke with the academic director, and I said, you know, I think I should make it a book. And he said, you should. You really should. And that's how it started. So basically, even the culture of purpose has its origin in the purpose. That was really to say, a lot of people struggle. How can we help them communicate better? but you also need to give them the tools to communicate better, and at the same time you have to convince them that these tools are working. So I literally went back into the past and say, where are we coming from? What does neuroscience explain how our brain functions? Where are we today? How do you try to build something? And where are we headed? Because AI age is exponential. So how do we even communicate in a world where there's more and more noise? How do you stand out when so many people are capable to do so much, and now even more empowered with AI, spread out so many informations? How do you even make that people see and hear you?
And to help them, you actually created the tree of business life.
Yes.
Can you tell us something more about the famous tree? I can say that.
Yeah, I actually get it now. The people go like, do me the tree thing. See? So the idea was to say, how can I visualize in a very, very simple way all these components and the logic behind it? And the tree, so tree of life is basically a tree that is kind of forever, and there's a circulation in the tree. And here you have to think of the roots of your tree. That's the vision of your organizations. That's why you do something. So you have to be rooted deeply in a purpose, so the soil of purpose, if you want. That's where you anchor your why, your vision, so that your tree is solidly anchored. Because if you do not anchor deeply with roots that are solid, wind comes and your tree falls over, no matter how big and how nice your tree is. To be alive, you have to be anchored. Then, when you know why you do it and you have defined this in a vision statement, comes the next step. How am I going to do that? How am I executing against this vision? That's your mission statement. You describe how you are going to try to tackle that problem. I care about one thing deeply, and I have developed this technology to get there. The outcome is what you offer. That's your value proposition. Now you have why as a vision, how is your mission, and what you offer is the value proposition. If people start to feel that this is aligned, as we say, you talk the talk, walk the walk, or I say what I do and I do what I said. If you have that, then people feel this alignment. They perceive it as something authentic. And this authenticity will trigger trust. And if you trigger trust, they will start to listen to you. They might even like you. And that's a way to convince them. To what we were saying before, that's what a storyteller does. That's what an evangelist does. It's not pitching to sell. It's communicating these values. And if you can show through your communication that there's an honest alignment, people feel that. And that's what you want. And when you have that alignment, it's literally like if the sap was going up the tree, you can go down through culture. Imagine it's kind of a prism where everything now can spread through the foliage of the tree. And you have two ecosystems in a way. The most logic one that everyone thinks of is external. You think of marketing, PR, talking to customers, and if you talk well to customers, they will love your product, and they will talk to other customers, they become brand ambassadors. And if you do that, it propagates. Now you have a circulation. At the same time as it circulates, if I sell you something and you bought it because you're convinced by this vision, you will talk about it. But you will talk about it in your own words. Now you're enriching the culture. So you see, the culture is not static. It just will evolve also thanks to what the customers are telling about the brand. What many people forget is that the same thing happens inward. If I do the same as a leader with my team, and my team is convinced because they understand the values, I have been able to articulate our vision, and they do not do what they do because they get a salary, but because they choose to participate in these projects. That's how you mentioned Steve Jobs. Everyone that worked with him says he was a tough man. It was not easy, but they still stayed. They were just fascinated by the vision, and they wanted to be part of it. That's the whole idea. You don't have to be obnoxious. You can do it also in a very kind way and a nice way. But the idea is you have the same ecosystem. So now you have these two circulations. And if someone is enthusiastic working for a company, even the customers feel that. So you go into a store and you see that they love what they do, you feel it. And now you like the brand as well. So this is the whole idea, that if you can anchor yourself in purpose, you can have a solid trunk because what you offer is based on something aligned, this ecosystem can just function in a very natural way. I even came up with a word, I called it commusynthesis. So we all know what photosynthesis is, and here it's just converting basically information into meaning.
Which is very important now, because I think more than ever in history of humanity, we are faced with so much information that is available to the majority of the population with one click.
Yes.
But that is not the most important thing. So actually, what I'm interested in is how can storytelling help us in this world full of information with
Right.
AI coming to
Yes.
us? How can we be what you tell us you are going to show us in the book, how to be authentic?
Exactly. So that's really the purpose. Storytelling per se is just a tool. You have to go and anchor it. It has to be driven by purpose. And if you have that, then storytelling doesn't become about nicely phrasing something and making nice slogans or whatever. It's about sharing these values, showing this alignment. And if you know how to tap into these values and convey them, people feel that. And in an AI age, basically, in marketing now, today everyone has the same tools. I always compare it to a marketplace. You go to a marketplace and you have lots of merchants that are shouting to sell their stuff. And they shout louder and louder because there's many merchants. What happens to you if you walk there? You do not hear anything anymore. It's just noise. So we drown. And that's exactly what happens to us, for instance, in social media. We just drown. There's so much jumping at us that nothing really stands out anymore. What if there was a way to stop shouting and whisper? If you know how to talk to your audience and you can whisper in their ear, they will hear you. Not because you're shouting louder, but somehow now your authenticity makes them pay attention to what you have to say, because you know now how to share, because you know what your values are, what your vision is, and how you can explain the mission that helps you develop what you offer them. And in an AI age, it's even worse. The marketplace now, everyone has an amplifier, can even talk louder, make more noise. So everything looks the same. So I believe that eventually AI now with these tools, you can ask AI just to write text for you and do the posts and everything. But the thing is, everyone uses the same now. So how will we have things that stand out? So that means you have to use AI in a different way. To my students, I say, don't do lazy AI, which is copy paste what you have prompted. Do creative AI. Push further, push back, try things, push it. Like for those who know Avengers and Iron Man, for instance, I'll tell them it's Jarvis for Iron Man. He's just telling the machine how to push and think, but it's the human who has the idea, the insight, the creativity. Another example could be an architect. Before, when architects had to draw everything by themselves, it took maybe days to draw the drawings, the blueprints of one house. Today, with software, they can prepare several versions maybe in one day, because the machine is taking care of making all the calculations in terms of stability, the piping and everything. You don't need to think of that. Now you can focus much more on being creative, on imagining new things, on trying certain things, because it doesn't take too much time anymore. That's how I see AI, that it will push us to try more things, to be more creative. And if we do that, basically, we can let the machine do the things that are, not the creative human ones. Like in a factory today, robots or machines can do the things.
Repetitive.
And we can focus on the things that are unique, that make us unique. So we can, I hope that AI will push us to become again inherently human and go back to our creativity, and not just using a tool that does it for us, but bring new things. And I believe that the ones who will be standing out are the ones who are going to do that, meaningfully sharing stories using tools, but that augmented storytelling will still be anchored in purpose.
Thank you, Pascal. I think we couldn't conclude this better than with the last sentence you gave us this talk today. I wish to thank you for amazing 3 days you gave us here in Zagreb this week, and for all the knowledge and stories you have shared with us. I know I will treasure them, and thank you for taking time today to talk to us, to let us know how can storytelling help us in this AI-driven world. but also to giving us a glimpse into your book, The Cultural Purpose, which is going to be soon out, and we are very looking forward to all the reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. It's been wonderful being here the 3 days. It was really, everyone was super kind. The students were amazing. I hope they had as much joy as we had doing this, because it was really very intense and interactive, and they were playing along with us. So we had a blast. We already said we need to come back, and I will stay in touch also when the book is out, and I'm sure we will meet again.
We are going to do another
We will.
another talk or panel or masterclass here at Zagreb School of Economics and Management. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone who listened. See you. Bye.
Thank you.